Welcome into the Thunder Basketball Universe presented by COOP Ale Works. We are recording this on Monday, November 8th, which means the Thunder just defeated the San Antonio Spurs last night, marking their second consecutive victory. Not just their second consecutive victory, but the second consecutive victory bouncing back from 16 or more points. We're going to talk about all of that and so much more in today's podcast, so let's jump right into it. All right, Nick Gallo. We just need to jump into You Can Say That again because so many things happened in this game. A lot of things stood out, a lot of highlight-worthy plays, a lot of great, stat lines from players. So I think it would be best if we just jumped right into it.
Yeah, and I'm not even going to quiz you today. I'm just going to let you know who said it and who it was about. The quote was, I don't know if Mike knows this, but I look up to him. And that quote was delivered by Darius Bazley, who, when he came to the podium after the game against the Spurs, he didn't even answer the first question right away. He said, hang on, I want to just say something right off the bat. And he sort of just waxed poetic about Mike Muscala and the readiness that he showed in the game to be thrust into the spotlight there in the second quarter and just deliver on all fronts. Mike had 14 points in 5 minutes, just with supernova there so quickly. And so it was just cool to hear Darius talk about Mike in that way. And Mike Muscala's 30 years old, Darius Bazley's 21 years old, but there's a relationship there and there's a mentorship, even if you don't necessarily see it taking place on the floor. And even if Mike isn't even aware that it's happening behind the scenes, that's something that Darius wanted to just put out there into the world last night, and I thought that was sweet.
And it's even better knowing that Darius himself had a great night and contributed in a big way in that game. Through all 4 quarters, he was bringing really great energy. And for him to just say, you know what, I need to acknowledge Mike Muscala in this moment. That was big time for Darius. But Mike definitely deserved it for the effort that he brought into this game. And this is what Mike does, right? Coach Dagnall committed to bringing him off the bench for this reason. He knows that he's always going to be ready. He's a professional that has a lot of really great professional habits and is going to bring what the team needs whenever they need it. In the Clippers game, it was physicality, right? He came in and he was all over the boards. And even in the Lakers game, too, he was just a big physical presence on the glass. And then in this game, the team needed threes. They needed buckets. They needed points on the board. And, points are really hard to come by for the Thunder in that first half. And Mike Muscala in the second quarter flipped a switch for them. Yeah,
that's right. He is one of this team's microwave scorers off the bench. And we don't usually talk about guys who are 6'10", 6'11" that way as a microwave scorer. You typically think of a young, or smaller guard that, is getting in there, doesn't play a whole lot of defense and just chucks up threes. But the Thunder has such a luxury in that they have a player who's at Mike's size who can come in and drop in points at that quick level. I mean, he scored 20 points in 14 minutes. That's a Thunder record for that brief of amount of time. But, to your point, there was the nastiness there on the defensive end and on the glass as well. He only had 4 rebounds. That's what the stat sheet said, but it seemed like way more than that just in terms of the way he was physically contesting at the rim and the way he was boxing out. And Paris, I think this goes to show, players, when they get to their late 20s and 30s, are sometimes seen as finished products. Mike Muscala, I don't recall him exhibiting this level of toughness, physicality that was brimming off of him and being filtered to the rest of the team in his previous time here. This feels new and feels like a step forward that he's been able to make.
And I think it's a great example for everybody on the team. I mean, this was a very, very physical game, Gallo. This game against the Spurs. I mean, the refs were letting a lot of things go, and seemed like players, all over the floor, and guys were having to go to the rim and finish strong. The Spurs in general, they attack with a lot of physicality and a lot of force. Their guards really like to get into the paint. They lead the league in points in the paint per game, and so coming into it, there was just this tone of this is going to be you're going to have to play with some force in this game, and it really came as advertised in that game. And Mike, along with everybody else, especially in that second half, we'll get to this a little bit later, really turned the corner in terms of ramping up that physicality and taking it to the next level.
Yeah, and so the 3-pointers, that barrage was maybe a little bit louder, but when you look at the totality of what Mike did, that's what Darius was talking about in his quote.
Great quote. Great choice. All right. Here's mine. Mine's a little bit longer, so bear with me on this, but it's very, very good. One of the things that is synonymous with the Thunder is a competitive juice that it's at you. and putting teams on their heels with a mentality and with a physicality. I thought we captured that in the second half tonight. That was Mark Daigneault just talking about the recognition from his group that they needed to take it to the next level in the second half, and they responded exactly like they needed to.
One of the cool things about Mark is, having been here in Oklahoma City and with the Blue for as long as he was, I believe 5 years, before joining the Thunder coaching staff as an assistant, he had this really unique perspective where he wasn't necessarily involved in like the day-to-day game plans and, the coaching and the teaching on the floor, but he was in the building all the time and like able to be this great observer of the Thunder culture. And I think that's what made him prepared for this job, is recognizing what are the core tenets of what this team wants to be about, what this organization wants to be about. That's encapsulated in that quote, and it really came to fruition on the floor in the third.
What's interesting is this answer was to my question about Kenrich. I asked him about, because Kenrich really brought it in that fourth quarter. He was all over the floor just doing Kenny Hustle things per usual. And his answer was, yeah, that's what Kenrich brings every time he steps on the floor. He just plays with that sort of, he called it an ethos of just, hustle and energy. But everybody that contributed in that second half was all over the floor and brought what the team needed. And his point was, at this point with the Thunder, they're trying to balance, right, the blank slate that they have with this group and a young group of guys, but also recognizing the tradition that comes with wearing that Thunder logo. And that's this spirit that he's talking about, of just that competitive juice, that competitive fire. And Shea has talked about this multiple times about how, being competitive, we don't want to be applauded for it. Like that's something that we just want to have, and it's part of our identity, and it's expected from us every single night.
Yeah, not to be surprised by. It's this culture that we're talking about, though. I mean, Kenny Hustle, Kenrich Williams, has played in front of Thunder fans 3 times. That was his 3rd game playing in front of Thunder fans.
Good point.
He knows how to be a Thunder player, though. Like, that's ingrained in the culture enough that over the last year, when there were no fans in the building, when he had come in brand new, I mean, some of that is innate to him, of course, but it wasn't like this necessarily for him in, his previous professional stop. And, just to have that sort of clear when players come in, like, this is what's expected of you. That's exactly what Mark is talking about.
Absolutely. And the team really, really showed that in full force in the second half. Clearly, I just can't wait to talk about the second half.
Yeah.
It's just, it has a lot to talk about.
We'll layer that in a little bit later. We won't jump the gun too much.
All right, time for Name That Dude.
Okay. This player scored 11 points, racked up 11 rebounds, 4 assists, a block, and a steal. Stat sheet filler.
So a double-double.
A double-double.
So Darius Bazley.
Yeah.
Yep.
Double-double for Darius. Yes, this was one of his best games of the season, in my opinion. Maybe one of the best games of his career, excuse me. Just the tenacity, kind of like what we were talking about with Mike. I mean, there were some defensive rebounds in that second half that showed up that could have made his stat sheet say 21 instead of 11. Like, they counted for more than one, the way that he was corralling some of these boards, and they were contested rebounds, guys kind of hanging all over him, and he was going up and getting them. I'm not even talking about the high-flying put-back dunk on the offensive end. That was sensational.
That was wild.
That was a huge booster as well. But Darius just continuing to find his niche in terms of how he can be a high leverage, high impact player for this team without necessarily being a 20-point per game scorer. The Thunder's got that in Shea, and they've got other guys who are coming along on the offensive end. Darius can be a guy who accepts these great defensive challenges every night at the wing spot. He can be a guy that is dominant with his energy, his hustle, his rebounding. And he's, as Mark Daigneault would say, he's continuing to kind of like set a new bar for himself, and then he's chasing the consistency at that bar. And of course, it's not going to happen right away, but last night he was able to achieve that for a full 48 minutes.
Darius, his entire career, his constants have been, running the floor, rebounding the ball, and bringing it defensively. Those are the things that were kind of the what Coach called the anchors to his game, right? And so now we're seeing him kind of bring the consistency in terms of, like you're saying, the ceiling of how he can bring the energy into those core anchors, and also layering in, different elements into his game. What I found so interesting, Gallo, is over the past 4 games, Darius has come out of the gates in the first quarter and brought it offensively. He's gotten out to really strong starts in those first quarters. I think 3 out of the past 4 games before coming into the San Antonio game, he was, scoring 8 or more points in those first quarters. So that was an indicator that he was coming ready to play.
And that's a level of professionalism that Mark is trying to get to with these guys. Is like, be ready from the outset.
Right. And that's a tough professional habit to build for any player. And so that was a really cool sign of growth for Darius. This game in particular, it was all 4 quarters. It was something from Darius, whether it was, a really aggressive, how many rebounds did he just rip down that he seemed like he came out of nowhere? And then you have the monster putback dunk. Kenrich Williams missed a 3, and out of nowhere, Darius just flies in and catches it in midair. I don't know how high he got, but it was definitely like it was up there.
It was incredible. His hand was definitely above the box.
Definitely.
But also some of the quieter plays. He had a really patient drive one time when the offense was kind of slowed up. He had a chance to just kind of stop the ball, but he didn't do it. He didn't lean into just like, okay, let me stop and survey. He kept probing with the dribble. He kept waiting for the defense to react, and he was patient enough to find the right pass when it finally materialized.
Yeah, and just like you're saying, he keeps finding new ceilings and just keep trying to reach that level every single night. This is a great, great performance from Darius that he can use moving forward throughout the rest of the season.
And it's a reminder, just the way that the team is looking at him, and it, I think, is a lesson for all of the fans and for us as well as we watch Darius, like, to still remember that this guy is 21 years old.
Right.
He didn't play college. He came basically straight from high school. He took a year off of basketball. He's played in 2 crazy pandemic seasons as his first 2 NBA years. Never really had a chance to play in the G League because he was starting for the Thunder sometimes in his rookie year. And then, the blue situation was just not really there for them last year. So he's been thrust into a lot of this stuff maybe before a lot of guys picked at the 23rd pick, which is late in the first round, would have been. So we should be celebrating these continual wins that we see from Darius and recognize, where he is on his growth and development curve. He's still got a long ways to go, and he's still making progress.
One last thing about Darius was, you mentioned it, just the defensive assignments that he's gotten this season. Well documented that he has gone up against some of the highest all-star caliber players in this league so far, just this season, really.
Yeah.
And after the game, Darius mentioned that, he asked Coach for this opportunity. Obviously, Lou is going to be able to come out and guard the team's best players, but the best teams don't just have one guy.
Right.
They've got multiple guys, and Darius wants that opportunity to get the experience to go up against that other guy as well, and he has gotten that so far this season.
The way that Darius said that was so cool to me because first of all, it reminded me of anybody that I know in their job who goes to their boss and asks for more responsibility.
Yeah.
Hey, could I try doing this? I really feel like that would help me grow and help open up some things for me in my game. But also, it sort of speaks to like the vulnerability of players in the NBA and how guys are looking for those things to help them grow and help them get to the next level, and that they might not always be sure about what's best for them, what's safe. Darius could easily have not said that and said, let me stay in my lane and make sure that I don't, mess up. I don't get embarrassed. I don't, have these moments that are hard for me. But Darius has the mental fortitude and the backbone to ask for more and be willing to fail and be willing to get put into positions that might be a bit over his head now, so that 2-3 years from now he's mastering those situations.
Right, like Coach Dagnall says, you got to take your licks now, but it's going to pay off in the long run. So really, really cool to see from Darius.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, my stat line is 13 points, 3 3-pointers, 4 rebounds, and 2 blocks.
Well, in a game where scoring was hard to come by and neither team scored more than 100 points, and the Thunder only shot 28.6% from 3, if a guy hits 3 threes, you know who it is. It's one or two guys. Jeremiah Robinson-Earl.
That is correct.
Who is, I need to double check the stats as of this morning, but definitely in the top 3 among rookies in field goal percentage and 3-point percentage.
Definitely going into that Spurs game, that's where he stood. And after this performance, I would imagine, not a lot has changed probably for Jeremiah, but he started in this game. And I wanted to point this out because obviously very physical game. And for a rookie every experience you get is a brand new experience. And so for Jeremiah to come into this game, it's not his first time starting.
Right.
It's not his first time starting at the 5, but it's his first time starting at the 5 against the Spurs, who was without Jakob Poeltl, so they were playing a little bit smaller, but it was still a super physical game. So it was just kind of a different situation for Jeremiah. And it was cool for me to see him kind of find where he could fit in this offensive, performance for the Thunder and help bring something to the table on that end of the floor.
He was doing his pick and pop game. He was trying to roll. He was really trying to set physical screens to open things up for players. And I think, his track was similar to the team's in that, nothing was really easy early on for him. I mean, the Thunder got down 9-0 at the beginning of this game, had to call a timeout before they even scored. So it took a little bit just to get the machine working, and same for Jeremiah. But as the game went along, he continued to find a rhythm, and he hit some big-time shots for the team throughout the course of the game. That's one thing that's been really impressive about him and Josh Giddey as rookies. They've not been afraid of the moment, and there have been some third quarter and fourth quarter plays where they've had the ball in their hands, and the whole arena is sort of like gasping a little bit. They've got it's got that little what's going to happen right now, and they've come through.
Yeah, one play that just sticks out in my mind was the half-court lob that Shea had to JRE. I mean, Shea literally just came across the timeline, and Jeremiah was behind the defense. I feel like he kind of timed it, knowing that it wasn't necessarily a set play, but he needed to keep his eye on Shea, knowing that, this guy can distribute the ball really well, which he did, and he got him a lob play. It was just for me, that play said a lot about Jeremiah and his IQ and mentality, knowing that, okay, if I get behind the defense, if I time this right, I might be able to get a bucket here.
Yeah, part of a 12-2 fourth quarter run for the Thunder that really broke the game open. Spurs, closed later on, but every single one of those runs matters immensely in the course of the game. It just gives you a little bit of breathing room so that when it does come down to crunch time, you've at least separated yourself a little bit.
Absolutely true. All right, we're going to take a short break here, and we'll be right back.
COOP Ale Works is the proud sponsor of Thunder Basketball Universe. Brewers of the fan favorites F5 IPA and 99-calorie Ice Chest IPA. You'll find those and many more COOP beers at retailers across Oklahoma. Learn more at CoopAleWorks.com.
Well, we talked about Jeremiah Robinson-Earl. He was one of the players who contributed big time in the Thunder's massive third quarter turnaround to help shift the momentum back in their favor and put this game back on the right track. He went a perfect 3 for 3 from the field. That included 2 made 3-pointers, 8 points. But really, it was a collective effort by this Thunder group to turn this game around in the third quarter.
Particularly defensively, if you look at the numbers for San Antonio in that quarter, they're staggering. I mean, first of all, OKC outscored them 34-14 in the period, which is stunning. But the Spurs shot 28% from the field and 0 for 9 from 3. That's incredible defense, an incredible job by the Thunder to out-rebound the Spurs, also by 13 in the quarter. Obviously, the more misses, the more likely you're going to rebound those as a defensive on the defensive side. But you're not allowing second chances, which was also a huge aspect of this, because with that many shots flying off the rim, especially the 9 3-pointers that were missed, sometimes those end up in second chances that can be backbreaking, and the Thunder closed the door on all of those.
At halftime, the coaches in the locker room, they challenged this team to bring more physicality. They felt like the Spurs were really throwing the first punch. They were the more physical team. The Thunder only had 3 fouls in that first half.
0 free throws allowed.
For San Antonio, which it has its pros and cons, right? That means that it could be a sign of really disciplined defense, or it could be a sign that there's a chance to turn up the physicality and kind of, enforce your will a little bit.
Right.
That's where the Thunder wanted to flip the switch. They wanted to bring more physicality in that third quarter, and that's what they did. But to your point, they still managed to do that without fouling and being uncontrolled on the defensive end.
Yeah, there's just a balance that you have to strike. And I mean, Paris, you'd probably know better than I would, just like how you turn it around at halftime and just suddenly start being more physical like that. And for the entire group to adopt that all at once, that's sort of a complex and complicated thing. And to not have one guy be all over the place in one way and the other guys not, but they managed to do that. They managed to find that equilibrium. I think it starts obviously with leaders like Derek Favors and Mike Muscala and Shea and But anybody can be a leader, as we've talked about. Mark Daignault saying the guy who's doing the right thing is the leader at that time.
Right. And when we talk about physicality, it's not just on the defensive end, right? It's on the offensive end as well. It's when you're driving to the rim and knowing you're going to take on contact, not anticipating a foul though, and trying to finish anyway. That's physicality. Setting a really solid screen on offense so that your guy can get free. That's physicality. Also on the defensive end, bumping guys on their cuts, boxing out, carving out space, all of those things. There's just little things in between game or in between plays that all fall into this category of playing more physical, and it all just boils down to making your opponent feel you.
Yeah, and one guy that didn't show up as flashily or doesn't show up as on the stat sheet as much, but Lou Dort was barreling into the paint, possession after possession, hard drives. He wasn't finishing all of them, and he wasn't necessarily drawing fouls on all of them either, but eventually they wore him down. And that's something that started to happen in the second quarter. Was the Thunder got to the free throw line, I think 4 out of 5 possessions. Right. And you just start to those types of things start to percolate over the course of time, and they start to wear the other team down. When Lou is coming at you again and again and again, when Kenrich Williams is in your jersey possession after possession after. But by the way, it was his 4th game in front of Thunder fans, not his 3rd. I messed that up earlier. Sorry about that. But yeah, when these guys are just physical and harassing you and tipping loose rebounds to one another. That was one of the big things in the second half, was just how many rebounds were joint combined team rebounds.
Yeah, and the multiple efforts that had to happen for this group on defense. I mean, the Spurs were a team, they would drive, might not get something, pass it off to the next guy would drive in. And so you had to be physical, not just on one play in that possession, but multiple times. And then you had to go and grab the rebound and finish it off. That's going to require a lot of effort and energy on one possession. And so it says a lot for this group that they were able to do that for the entire third quarter and, of course, into the fourth quarter as well. One guy I want to point out in this third quarter is Shea.
Yeah.
Because he came out of the gates hot. He had 7 straight points. And this is a game for Shea where it wasn't necessarily his flashiest offensive game. I mean, his shot wasn't necessarily falling the way that he would have liked, but he found a way to continue to keep the ball moving and facilitate so that everybody else could get involved, even if his shot wasn't necessarily falling.
Just cracking the paint was huge for him. And that's, how he was able to generate, I think he had 3 of his 9 assists in the third quarter. And in addition to the 9 points that he had, at halftime, he was sitting there at 5 points and not a very good shooting percentage. And he was able to just kind of will his way back into the game. Some of these downhill drives by his teammates were then starting to create gashes in the defense overall. And, when all 5 players on the floor can keep a defense honest, that was a big benefit of having a player like Mike go off shooting threes. When you have Jeremiah knocking down threes, well, then the defense has to play it a little bit more honest. They've got to stay home on their guys more. And that gives Shea an opportunity to crack those seams and make plays and finish those nifty little layups around the rim.
Yeah, and this all kind of rolled over into the fourth quarter where the Spurs were able to close the door a little bit, got it down to one possession. But the Thunder, again, what stands out to me is the poise and the composure of this group. They're obviously no strangers to having come back from large deficits. Their past 3 wins have been overcoming those large deficits. So they're no strangers to that. But it's the composure, even when the Spurs throw their punch, when they're within striking distance, and even tie the game up, take the lead there in the fourth quarter, the Thunder remain poised, remain calm, and stick to what got them the lead in the first place.
And that's by playing team basketball and just letting the ball find the open man. One of the best possessions of the entire game was a crunch time bucket that Josh Giddey created for Lou Dort after some incredible ball movement. Ball swung around the perimeter. It ended up getting kicked back out to Giddey. He pump fake, drove a closeout, hung in the air for a second and waited for a defender to commit, and then dropped it off to Lou at the dunker spot. Paris, the Thunder's 3 highest drafted players, Derek Favors at 3rd overall way back when, Josh Giddey, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, they combined for 0 points in the fourth quarter of that game, and the Thunder ends up winning. That just speaks to the way that the team played just for the team. They let the team create the shot.
Yep. And the contagious sort of energy that happens when you've got guys who are willing to do whatever is necessary and best for the team in that moment. It might not be a shot by me, but if I drive the lane, maybe I attract attention and I can kick it out to somebody else for a 3-point shot because I know that my teammates are going to be in the right spot. I know that they're sticking to what got us to this point so far. You got a guy like Lou posted up or spotted up in the corner. You got a guy like Kenrich who's running the floor in transition. You got a guy like Darius who's also running the floor and grabbing rebounds. So you've got everybody pulling in the right direction. And that, like you're saying, they want to compete together. They want to solve problems with all 5 guys on the floor. 5 guys in double figures for this group in this game. And in the past 2 wins, there was 6 guys in double figures. That's consistent for this group. That's not coincidence. That's because that's how this group wants to play in each game. All right. So that was a really monster game for the Thunder, but there was also something else in that game that was pretty cool to see, and it was Native American Heritage Night. So it was a lot of different things happening, but one of the coolest things, there were some special guests in the building, Gallo.
That's right. The cast of Reservation Dogs, the TV show on FX and Hulu, was actually in the building. And this show is filmed in Oklahoma. Its entire cast, crew, directors, pretty much everybody that's associated with the TV show is a Native or Indigenous person to North America. And so just very cool how intentional that show has been about its production, the fact that it's here in Oklahoma. And then the cast comes down and sits right down by the court as a part of the Native American heritage festivities that were happening throughout the game. You had the invocation, the national anthem, halftime performance. I mean, everybody that was sort of associated with the entertainment was either Native or Indigenous. And so one thing that really stood out to me that was really cool was when someone was announced as being a part of the Kiowa tribe in the building, inside Paycom Center, you started to hear a call or a noise that's associated with the tribe. And it was a really nice reminder of just our Thunder family and how diverse the Thunder family is and how people, Native Americans, are a part of our community and a crucial part of our Thunder fan base.
And from what I've heard, the cast and crew of Reservation Dogs had a blast at the game last night. And I mean, who wouldn't have a blast at that game? So really cool to see them come out. You talked about halftime. I was back in the VOMs waiting to talk to assistant coach at half. So I only caught a little bit of the halftime performance, but from what I saw, the crowd was into it. It was Superman performing at halftime, and he stole the show. I mean, the spotlight was on him, and you could tell the crowd was into it as well.
That's one of the hardest parts about, our jobs is that we don't always get to experience some of the stuff that happens inside the arena. One other thing that we can bless your timeline with is, for the second time already this season, we have a $20,000 shot contest winner, mid-first bank, half-court shot contest, and it was nailed again.
I know.
This is unbelievable.
I know. That's 2 for 4
right,
in terms of home games. And Spencer Green, he was 18 years old. Gallo, you got to interview him right after this. And I remember I was ready to go for my first quarter hit. And all of a sudden, I just hear the crowd erupt behind me. And I'm like, what is going on? Turns around. Spencer Green nailed the shot.
Yeah, we were a little bit more prepared this time for the mid-court shot contest winner because we had already had one like a week ago. And so I go sprinting over to the corner. He's coming off with this, the massive check.
Yep.
And he just told me that he's, getting ready to go to college next year. He's really excited about that. He's going to use the money to further his education, and he wants to be a physical therapist. So I just told him, maybe he'll work in the NBA someday. Maybe we can help these guys, one day just recover from injury or maintain their bodies. And it would be a pretty amazing story if he went on to to do something in sports, given the way that this money will certainly help him further his education.
I'm curious. Rumble now has helped 2 out of 4 shot contest winners.
There's a magic touch
it's
with
like
Rumble.
He grabs their head and he touches his head to theirs. And I'm like, what information is being passed in that moment?
I'm just glad that Rumble's not asking them to shoot it over their heads backwards like he
does,
because we wouldn't have two shot contest winners if that was
true.
the case.
Rumble definitely has a lot of practice
Yes.
in those in that occasion. All right, before we go, we want to keep you up to date, and so here's what's on tap for the Thunder coming down the line. The team has a day off today, but they will leave for New Orleans tomorrow. That game is going to be on Wednesday, and then you're going to want to come back to TBU because we've got another pod coming to you on Thursday. Definitely going to want to be here for that one. A lot of cool things coming down the line for TBU. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to catch us on YouTube as well. Thank you so much to our producer, Matt Bishop. And until next time, Thunder up and catch you later.